Siga caminando. Presidente de Venezuela. Tiene derecho a guardar silencio. Cuidado con el escalón. Vamos, muévase. No tiene jurisdicción aquí. Todo eso lo discute en Miami. Suba.
Pictures. This is from the White House Rapid Response X account. You can see there Nicolas Maduro. He is at the Drug and Enforcement Agency in Manhattan, being flanked by officials there. Some short pictures, so we'll show you them a couple of times. We know that he arrived in the United States a few hours ago at a military airport and then was taken here to the DEA. Subsequently, he has headed for the detention centre in Brooklyn, where we expect him eventually to be formally charged.
Why did you make the decision to take out Maduro this morning? And what was Maduro doing when our guys came in on him?
So we were going to do this 4 days ago, but the weather was not perfect. The weather has to be perfect. And we had just the perfect weather. We had, very good. A little bit few more clouds than we thought, but it was good. We waited 4 days. We were going to do this 4 days ago, 3 days ago, 2 days ago. And then all of a sudden it opened up and we said go. And I'll tell you, it was just amazing. And what was he doing? He was in a very highly guarded, like a fortress, actually. He was in a fortress. That we had nobody killed was amazing. I think we had nobody killed, I have to say, because a couple of guys were hit, but they came back and they're supposed to be in pretty good shape. But that we had nobody killed, that we lost no aircraft. Everything came back. We got it all back. One of them was hit pretty hard, but a helicopter, but we got it back. But it just was the right time to do it. We had to do it because it's a war. We're losing 300,000 people a year. We don't lose that much in a war. Okay, if you look, and we had to do it. But he was in a house that was more like a fortress than a house. It had steel doors. It had what they call a safety space, where it's solid steel all around. He didn't get that space closed. He was trying to get into it, but he got bum rushed so fast that he didn't get into that. We were prepared. We had massive blowtorches and everything else that you need to get through that steel, but we didn't need it. He didn't make it to that area of the house.
And we start with Lucas Tomlinson live in West Palm Beach, where the Commander-in-Chief has been spending the holidays. And Lucas, you've had great coverage overnight here. What else are we learning about this operation?
Well, good morning, Griffin. A daring operation in the pre-dawn hours and 2 a.m. local in Caracas, 1 a.m. East Coast time. U.S. Special Operations Forces flew in from off the coast of Venezuela to snatch Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro and his wife. President Trump announcing the news on Truth Social a short time ago. I'll read it for our viewers. It says, quote, "The United States of America has successfully carried out a large-scale strike against Venezuela and its leader, President Nicolas Maduro, who has been, along with his wife, captured and flown out of the country. This operation was done in conjunction with U.S. law enforcement. Details to follow. There will be a news conference today at 11 a.m. at Mar-a-Lago. Thank you for your attention to this matter. President Donald J. Trump." And just before the assault force arrived at Maduro's compound, you can imagine the intelligence that U.S. intelligence agency had to have to know where to send the assault force to be able to locate and grab Maduro as well as his wife. You had numerous airstrikes throughout Caracas targeting Maduro's forces at a military base in Caracas as well as an air base, also Venezuela's largest port. And this is something President Trump has been threatening for months. It started with the drone strikes on the alleged drug boats in the Caribbean and the Eastern Pacific, over 24 to date, killing over 100 people. You saw it when U.S. forces seized, as a law enforcement matter, the oil tankers that the Trump administration said were associated with the Maduro regime. The goal is to cut off the drug and oil revenue stream for Nicolas Maduro. And for months, we've heard President Trump say that Maduro must go, and Maduro was very defiant. Despite repeated threats from President Trump, over 15 times, President Trump said he will be striking on land. Recall on Monday, we heard the president confirming that the CIA struck a target along the coast of Venezuela, destroying some of Maduro's drug boats. And again, this has been something that is not quite unprecedented. We saw in 1989 with the seizure of Manuel Noriega from Panama. This is something that the president wanted. We had not heard from President Trump, almost shades of Operation Midnight Hammer when those B-2s struck Iran. We haven't seen President Trump over the past 2 days. We heard from him on New Year's Eve. It was interesting. A reporter asked the president what his goal was for this coming year. He replied, peace. Well, for the President Nicolas Maduro, he didn't get that. Now, we did hear from Maduro yesterday, guys. He sounded like he was almost pleading in an interview done from a car, believe it or not, saying he was almost begging the Trump administration for a deal with oil. Of course, many American oil firms were kicked out of Venezuela decades ago. We've heard from President Trump in recent days saying he wants that oil back, and the company's in.
Well, and it's, excuse me, pretty clear, Lucas, that the clock had run out for Nicolas Maduro to come to the table despite that interview that he did. Lucas, we're just getting a tweet this morning from Senator Mike Lee, who is saying just got off the phone with Secretary Rubio. He informed me that Nicolas Maduro has been arrested by U.S. personnel to stand trial on criminal charges in the United States, and that the kinetic action we saw tonight was deployed to protect and defend those executing the arrest warrant. This action likely falls within the president's inherent authority under Article 2 of the Constitution to protect U.S. personnel from an actual or imminent attack. It's interesting as we read that, Lucas, the Vice President, Delcy Rodriguez of Venezuela, took earlier to state TV in Venezuela demanding proof of life of Maduro. But it's pretty apparent that it's unclear who is running that country right now. You're looking live at some of the strikes that were carried out there. Do we have any more indication about who is running the country there now, and whether or not any of the other individuals like the Vice President and others associated with Maduro's regime may be targets still?
What's notable, that statement from Venezuela's vice president confirming the news from President Trump that President Nicolas Maduro and his wife were seized by that American assault force, likely either the Delta Force or SEAL Team 6, flown by the 160th Special Operation Aviation Regiment, the Night Stalkers, the most elite pilots in the world. It's notable. We saw the video of those U.S. Army helicopters flying low over Venezuela under the cover of those airstrikes in darkness, that you didn't see any Venezuelan surface-to-air missiles or AAA anti-aircraft fire. And it's notable, Griff, that I spoke to Elliot Abrams, President Trump's former special envoy to Venezuela recently. He said this was a showdown between President Trump and Nicolas Maduro, and there could only be one winner. And that is why President Trump likely did not back down. You had this large military buildup in the Caribbean. You have about a dozen warships offshore. You have the USS Gerald R. Ford strike group that was rerouted from Europe, came to the Caribbean. You have the USS Iwo Jima amphibious assault ship. You have dozens of helicopters aboard there, of course, dozens of strike aircraft aboard Ford. You also had squadrons of F-35 stealth fighter jets from the Air Force that arrived in Puerto Rico in recent days, from the Air Force, including the Green Mountain Boys from Vermont. You also had the Marine Corps F-35 Bravo version also on the ground in Puerto Rico. She had this large armada and firepower assembled. You had KC-135 refueling planes in the Dominican Republic. President Trump offered no indication that he was backing down from his threat. And President Trump, when he makes these threats, typically follows through. And that's what we saw in the pre-dawn hours this morning. And again, there could only be one winner in this showdown, and it was not Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, it appears.
So, Lucas, real quick, we understand that that this operation was successful and is over. But do you have the sense that it is, in fact, over with and the firefight is finished? And then where do we go from here?
Well, Charlie, the U.S. military likes to operate at night. The pilots would have night vision goggles. The assault force would have had night vision goggles. That is their perfect time to launch these kind of operations, is under the cover of darkness, not because most people are asleep. Likely Maduro and his wife were probably asleep when they blew up the door and grabbed him. So we've heard from Senator Lee also in that thread you just read. He says he was informed by the Secretary of State that the operation is over. It appears the goal was not just to strike the Maduro regime, and that could have almost been a distraction from the main objective, which was to snatch the Venezuelan president and his wife so they could face charges back in the United States.
Lucas, back in October, President Trump sent a clear message to Maduro saying this.
Mr. President, it has been reported that Maduro offered everything in his country, all the natural resources. He even recorded a message to you in English recently, offering mediation. What should we do in order to stop that?
He has offered everything. He's offered everything. You're right. You know why? Because he doesn't want around with the United States.
Yeah, the president didn't mince words, Lucas. You know, this is obviously a signature moment for President Trump and his administration, another precise, swift, and seemingly effective military operation. What do you think we can expect to see from the international community in response?
Well, allies of the United States are going to be on the side of the United States, and America's adversaries are going to come down pretty strong on this. And when you read this, the statement from Senator Lee talking about Article 2 and the president's authority to carry out this operation, likely probably getting a jump on some of the criticism that the president might be facing with Democrats on Capitol Hill. So perhaps a little cover there from Senator Lee. So adversaries of the United States and, of course, Maduro's allies, Russia, China, and Iran, are going to come down very strongly on this operation. And let's not forget that in early December, War Secretary Pete Hegseth outlined America's new national security strategy. Part of it was bringing back what he called the Monroe Doctrine, taking control of the Western Hemisphere. There are officials in the Trump administration, including Secretary Rubio, that want to decrease the influence of China, Russia, and Iran. Of course, we've seen Hezbollah operatives set up shop in Venezuela in the past. This was all the reason that President Trump wanted a change in Venezuela.